And welcome into the Paul Farrington Show. Paul joined by Robert Ziggy Ziegler at the University of Virginia. Jack and Zach will be back next week. Jack's still recovering from his cold, and Zach is also recovering from some colds, and he's been working hard this week. So we decided to keep it within the house today. Just me and Ziggy coming to you. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Remember, we are chasing down 10,000 subscribers. Thanks to everyone who's been subscribing. We just reached 8,000, which was, an awesome milestone to get to, as we've had a really good past month or so. It's been really fun watching all the engagement come in. We're having a great time talking to everybody. Some big coaching decisions today, Ziggy. The Packers move on from Joe Barry. Jim Harbaugh, just a couple hours ago, signed on with the Chargers. Bill Belichick rumors are flying around. We'll hit that towards the end of the show. But let's start in the NFC. The Lions, as we said, 60 minutes away from going to the Super Bowl somehow. It's, going up against the 49ers. They've met twice in the playoffs before. I don't know if you know this history here. In 1957, the Lions beat the 49ers 31-27 to win in the divisional round. They wound up winning an NFL championship that year. Then in 1983, Joe Montana and the 49ers in the divisional round beat the Lions 24-23. That's all. That's all the playoff history between these two teams. Now Sunday, they're going head-to-head for the Super Bowl. I wanted to read this message, and this is how we'll start today. Yesterday at 8, or I guess this would be Tuesday at 8:51 p.m., I get a text from Ziggy out of nowhere that just says, the Lions can do it. And I said, what did you discover? So Ziggy, please tell me please tell the guys what you told me.
So there are a few things. Here's what I was thinking. Here's what's sort of cooking around in my brain is I see last week the 49ers struggle at home and barely beat the Packers. And I think, all right, what went wrong for the 49ers that game? Well, there are a few things that went wrong. Number one, Shanahan made a number of baffling coaching decisions. We're talking punting 4th and short with the best offense in the league. Horrible usage of timeouts, right? Consistently baffling coaching decisions. Number two thing they struggled with, boy howdy, they gave up a lot of yards to Aaron Jones. The run game, they were not able to stop it from the Packers. The run defense was not ready. The pass rushers were good. Don't get me wrong. The linebackers played well, but the Packers' run game was able to be well established. And number three, Brock Purdy threw some passes that if he just had some surer hands, could have been intercepted. Darnell Savage, chance for a pick six, a few more missed opportunities. Then I go to this Detroit Lions team and think, well, what are they really good at, right? What is this team's strengths? Number one, Dan Campbell makes great decisions. He's consistently aggressive, especially when he's an underdog.
He's very aggressive.
I get that some people don't always look. You can run the numbers. You can look at expected win probability. He is far and away the best coach in the NFL at saving timeouts for important moments and using them when he should. Making good 4th down decisions, being aggressive when he should. Going for 2 and usually when he should. We'll set aside that absolute tilt roll. Yeah. He's generally pretty good at that. And importantly, when he's an underdog, we've seen this, he plays for variance. He makes aggressive decisions. The Lions never go down without a fight. You think, what's the strength of the Lions offense? Answer, lightning and thunder. Right, you've got David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs, some of the most explosive, most effective rushers in the entire league. It's like Aaron Jones, but 2 of them.
They've been great.
Then you think, well, who have been the standout players on the defense? I'll tell you who stands out to me more than anyone else. Brian Branch. It seems whenever the Lions need a big play from the defense, he's right there with an interception or with a sack or with a huge play. So all that to say, it seems to me that the Lions have an opportunity to do what the Packers did, but you're not going to have Jared Goff throwing a critical interception because he takes care of the ball better than that.
Do you trust Jared Goff more than Brock Purdy in this game?
It's tough for me to say not. I get what people are going to say. They're going to say, look at Brock Purdy's numbers. Look at his production. He's played super well. And Brock Purdy has definitely played well. But the Lions' offensive line has protected Goff. And when Goff is protected, he doesn't turn the ball over. Brock Purdy hasn't turned the ball over much this year, but if you watch his play style, he throws a lot of risky balls. He is willing to heave it into double coverage when he really shouldn't. And you saw it in the Packers game. Even though you've got people in the media saying Brock Purdy brings it home, game-winning drive, all that's true. He made some horrendous throws that easily could have cost him the game.
Oh, by media.
Jared Goff just doesn't do that.
By media, you mean like Lombardi on Twitter?
Look, I'm talking like, look, sure, are they trolls on Twitter? Yeah, but these are also people who get paid six figures to talk about sports.
Insanity. I've been seeing all the Brock Purdy. I think Brock Purdy's a good quarterback. I'm not going to argue.
Yeah, we're not saying he's bad.
It's just when you watch that game and say Brock Purdy played, proved people wrong, proved the doubters wrong. I sit back and say, what game were you watching, man? He was clearly not on. The last drive to win the game, fantastic, but I'm with you. I don't particularly trust either quarterback too much in the big moment here, but Jared Goff is the one who I have more confidence in. He's just been really good all season long. 30 touchdowns, fourth in the league, 12 interceptions, is a 97.9 rating on the season, over 100 rating the past 3 games. We talked about on the reaction show to the Bucs game, Jared Goff put away Tampa Bay. He put away the Rams in those drives that the Lions not necessarily needed to have, but the ones that Jordan Love, for example, couldn't put San Francisco away. Jared Goff was doing that. And he's been great all year long. Purdy, as you said, has had a lot of moments, not a lot, but against Green Bay and then in the losses, has had moments where he's just been downright awful. And then when you get good Purdy, he's basically flawless, gets the ball where it needs to go, and the 49ers are almost unbeatable. Can you make him make those mistakes? My concern for Detroit, and this is where I'd love to hear your opinion on this, because it sounds like you think Detroit has a really good chance. I'm concerned about that pass defense, man. The past 3 weeks, they've allowed 396 yards to Nick Mullins, 367, 2 touchdowns to Stafford, 349, 3 touchdowns to Baker. I mean, they did have 2 interceptions against Baker, but this defense is getting picked apart. Cam Sutton has looked really bad over the past few weeks. I'm worried that if Deebo Samuel plays, we're talking about a 49ers offense that could score a lot of points, too many for Detroit to keep up with.
Yeah, I am. If I'm a Lions fan, I am cautiously optimistic that Deebo will play. Or at least if he will play, he's not going to be close to 100%. I mean, you read the stats. Mike Evans owned the Lions last week. Yeah. It wasn't enough to win, but it was tough.
Puka too. What Puka go for? Like 180 or something?
Yeah. I mean, they have been vulnerable. And in particular, they've been vulnerable to deep passes. Average depth of target against, 30th in the NFL. Sack percentage, 24%, or 24th in the NFL at only 6%. So they have struggled to sack quarterbacks, and they have struggled against the deep pass. But there's some reason for optimism. We saw last week they were able to get more players involved, right? In particular, Brian Branch had a pretty important sack. You look at, they've been starting to generate turnovers. You look at Aiden Hutchinson, he's really turned it on for the playoffs. Right? People have complained all season about him not getting sacks and just sort of racking up pressures. Well, all of those pressures are finally starting to turn into production. So you're absolutely right. The Lions are going to have to get after Brock Purdy, and their deep pass defense is a concern. But on the other side, it's not like the Lions aren't familiar with their own explosive plays, right? Their weapons are as good as Green Bay between Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, Khalif Raymond. They have a lot of players who are capable of getting separation and generating explosive offense. So it's not impossible, even though the Lions defense might be a little bit suspect, for them to keep up.
Yeah, and the Packers moved the ball too, quite consistently. It was really up until the end of the game when they needed one score to put it out of reach, or seemingly put it out of reach, that they started to struggle. 49ers defense made a couple plays. Jordan Love all of a sudden wasn't off necessarily, but was off on a couple throws that ultimately turned out to be the difference maker. It's it's just one of those games where Detroit's going to have to. Goff will have to show up. If Goff shows up and plays a good game, we should be looking at a back and forth contest. I'm just a little bit worried that if he's slightly off, San Francisco is going to put up points. I really do think they'll be awake for this one after the scare last weekend. They hadn't played in a while. So I'm leaning right now, if we're going to make a game pick, I'm leaning San Francisco by double digits. I know that's not what Lions fans want to hear, but it's been a great run for Detroit. This is just a really good 49er team. I think it'll be a good back and forth game for a while, but then the fourth quarter, San Francisco puts it out of reach. Are you going to go with Detroit?
Here's the number one stat to know if you're a Lions fan. You know what team, Paul, in the NFL is the best in EPA per rush on defense on the left side of the field? That critical San Francisco dominating left side of the field? The Detroit Lions.
The Detroit Lions.
Yeah, I obviously wouldn't be saying that, but their run defense has been one of the best in the entire NFL. And we saw it last week. If you don't have to stop Christian McCaffrey, but if you can slow him down, limit him to just one or two explosive plays and otherwise keep it contained, you will get an opportunity to generate turnovers in the pass game. The Detroit Lions, I think, are going to be able to do that. I think the offense is going to be able to keep up. And I've got the Lions winning a very close, very hard game.
Wow. Yeah, I'm not rooting against, or I know
you're rooting against. You can admit it. You don't want to see the Lions win the Super Bowl.
I don't want to see them win before the Vikings, but at the same time, I don't hate Detroit the way I really hate the Saints, the way I really dislike the Packers. It's the Saints are actually my number one. Detroit, I'm not necessarily rooting against them. I just don't want to see their success, which is kind of mean. But I'm not going to be actively cheering against them. If Detroit wins, I'll be very happy for my friends who are Lions fans. I think they're going to show up. I don't think they get blown out like Baltimore or like Baltimore blew out San Francisco. I don't think that's going to happen, or the Packers Cowboy game. I'm expecting two really physical, tough teams. Dan Campbell's not going to let them come in and get pushed around. If that Detroit offensive line holds up, which I think they will, 49ers, as stout as that defensive line is by name, the numbers they're putting up are not all world like you might expect. So if they hold up front, which I think they will, I think Detroit's going to give them a fight. But we'll see.
We'll see. GM has at their Flint, Michigan plant has officially delayed the start of their night shift on Sunday by an hour so that Lions fans can watch this game. I think all that energy has to matter for something.
Can you imagine the Lions in the Super Bowl? I mean,
this is why I'm rooting for the Lions. If the Lions can make the Super Bowl, that means any team, no matter how bad, can turn it around. And that speaks to my Vikings fan heart a little bit. Because that means maybe we'll be there someday, Paul. Maybe we'll be there.
Someday. You think someday. Dude, if the Cubs did it, the Lions are on their way. It has to be our turn at some point. You have to think. Let's go over Chiefs Ravens now. This is unequivocally the biggest game of Lamar Jackson's life. I don't even want to talk about the Lamar playoff struggles anymore. It's not.
No one cares.
Yeah, no one cares about that. If you're watching shows where people bring that up anymore, turn them off because it just doesn't matter at this point. They have their shot at the king, and they better not miss because Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs offense finally seems to have woken up. The Chiefs, as we all know, 6 AFC Championship game in a row, just an unbelievable accomplishment that we talked about in the Bills Chiefs reaction show. Speaking of streaks, the Ravens have won 10 out of 11 where Lamar's been healthy or started the game this year. 31 points or more in 7 straight home games. This has just been these are the 2 best teams in the AFC. And it's nice to see them clash. In 2019, we thought that might be the case, but Baltimore got bumped in the divisional round, that Lamar's MVP year. So I want to first talk about here. It seems that more and more people are starting to bring this up now. The Ravens rushing attack versus the Chiefs rushing defense. That's what I have circled. That's what most people are going to be circling. We know Baltimore is first in the league in rushing yards per game. Attempts, they do it all the time. Josh Allen ran crazy on them against the Chiefs last weekend. Chiefs defense is 18th in the NFL with 132.2 yards per game. But here's a stat I want to read to you, Ziggy, because I didn't know this until just a couple hours before the show. The Ravens rank 3rd in the NFL in both EPA and success rate as a running unit. The Chiefs now, this is the 5th game where they've played a team in the top 10 in both of those metrics. They are 1-4 in those games. The Bills, the Eagles, the Lions, the Packers, all losses during the regular season. Now, they did just beat the Bills. But if there's one way to attack this really, really good Chiefs defense, it's on the ground. And that's where it feels like Baltimore can just have a field day, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Ravens are going to try and do what they did against the Texans, right? People have talked a little bit. Lamar only threw for 159 yards, big whoop. Here's what the Ravens can do. They will obliterate you on the ground. And as you say, Steve Spagnuolo, right? The Chiefs have the number one sack rate in the entire NFL and arguably the best pass defense. I know L'Jarius Sneed is hurt. They're the best pass defense in the NFL of all the blitz packages they can do, all the confusing mix-ups.
They've been great.
But if you can move the ball against them effectively, none of that really matters, right? It doesn't matter how good Chris Jones is at getting to the quarterback. It doesn't matter how good L'Jarius Sneed is at locking guys down. It doesn't matter that George Karlaftis has sort of emerged as a premier young edge rusher. If you can just run the ball and impose your will. The Ravens are healthy, right? The running backs are ready to go. The offensive line is almost entirely healthy. Like, they are ready to play the Chiefs. And if you can just get that running game going, it stops the Chiefs from really doing what they want to do, namely get the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hand a lot, force explosive plays on defense, right? Sack quarterbacks, generate turnovers, get 3-and-outs. All the stuff they want to do is totally shut down. So as good as the defense has been, and as much as it's been improved, you're right that the rushing defense is a huge weakness. And especially because the Ravens defense can likely stop the Chiefs from taking off, getting an early 2-score lead, the kind of thing that forces you to pass, they'll definitely have a chance to exploit it.
The Bills ran the ball 17 times on first down in the divisional matchup, and on 70.6% of those series, they wound up moving the chains. So, they ran it early and often and had a big game on the ground. If there's anyone who can see what Buffalo did and enhance that, it's the Ravens, who are just, they run 4 deep now with Dalvin Cook with running backs, pretending Lamar Jackson's a running back in this situation. They might get Mark Andrews back as well. Isaiah Likely has come on the scene lately. He's been good all year, but lately it seems he's been tremendous. Zay Flowers, they can attack you in so many ways that if Kansas City can't shut down or at least control the run game, this is one where I can see Baltimore actually winning big. It's hard to say that against a Patrick Mahomes-led team, especially when we were talking before the show. We put out a reel with Ziggy answering, would he rather have Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes? And very logically, Ziggy says, I would rather have Patrick Mahomes, who is, in most people's eyes, the best quarterback in the NFL. And Ravens fans came at your throat, dude. They were all over you. And it's like, no, I still think the Ravens are going to win this game. I believe you do too. But against Patrick Mahomes, you can never say never. And that's where the Chiefs are 10-0 in games where they've scored 21 or more points this year. The defense is really good. Like, you can't overlook the Kansas City defense in this game. But what were you thinking of all those Ravens comments?
I get why they're a little bit aggressive, because Lamar Jackson's been disrespected so much through his entire career, right? I mean, we talked about this offseason, how baffling it was. It seemed no one wanted to even try and get this guy. Like, Lamar Jackson doesn't get enough respect, so I understand why they're like this. And I'm excited because in a certain way, as you talk about Patrick Mahomes, this is really the does defense matter bowl. The Ravens have an excellent offense. The Chiefs, even though the offense has struggled, it seems like they're finally starting to come alive. If defense matters in the NFL at all, then we're going to get to see the Chiefs defense and the Ravens defense having huge impacts on the game. In particular, I think we'll get to see the Ravens defense really limit what Patrick Mahomes is able to do. And let's not forget, Baltimore in the late afternoon tonight has more drops than anywhere else in the entire NFL, except for the Chiefs at night, right? So those afternoon Baltimore games, we could be seeing a whole lot of drops. But I don't know. I think this is a good matchup for Lamar Jackson. I think he matches up better than Patrick Mahomes does against the Ravens defense. I'm expecting big things from him.
So am I. In this one. And as you said in the reel, Lamar's one of the few guys in the league that can look Patrick Mahomes in the eye and say, I'm going to outperform you today, and actually do it. It's a great game, too, from a legacy standpoint. We won't get too much into that, but Lamar Jackson wins this one. Let's say he goes on and wins the Super Bowl. 2 MVPs, Super Bowl trophy, only his 6th year. Now we're talking about where is he starting to rank amongst great quarterbacks in the league. Mahomes, on the other hand, geez, if he goes on a Super Bowl run
with this team
and wins with this team going into Buffalo, into Baltimore, against Allen, against Lamar, possibly beating a 49ers team that everyone said is one of the best teams in football all year. Don't want to discount you, Detroit, but let's just pretend he's going against San Fran. 3 Super Bowls. He's, 28? I mean, now we're talking about, is he going to catch Brady? So big legacy implications on this game as well. When I'm picking it, I do think that this Baltimore team is just a little too good everywhere. I think Odell Beckham Jr. was the one who said this is the best team I've ever played on, and he was on a good Rams team just a few years ago, another Super Bowl winning team. I'm probably gonna go Ravens 27, 28 to 24. Let's say 28, 24 Ravens in this one, where it'll be good. This is a great, super fun dream AFC Championship game. What do you think?
I think this Ravens team really wants to do it for Lamar, and they know what's at stake here. You never need more motivation in the AFC Championship game. Let's get that clear. But everyone in that building knows that if they don't win this game, you know exactly what's going to be in the media. The Ravens, after all this time, after signing Lamar to their mega deal, after getting their defense, all they did in the playoffs was beat the lousy Houston Texans. Set aside the Houston Texans are not lousy. You know that's what's going to be said, right? So
yeah, they'll say they only could beat the rookie quarterback at home.
Yeah, you're at home. You've got the Baltimore Ravens crowd. I mean, that's one of the hardest places to play. It's as hard to play as Arrowhead or really anywhere else. I just can't pick against this Ravens team. They have no obvious weaknesses. Even the Chiefs, if you have to pick a weakness for them, I get that there's not a whole lot of them. Having the vulnerable rush defense and having the inconsistent passing game is not what I want to hear against a team with a superstar quarterback, an elite rushing game, and a strong pass defense, maybe the best in the NFL. I think the Ravens are going to win this one handily. The Chiefs have gone on something like a miracle run. I really think what they've done is incredibly impressive. It ends here. Give me the Ravens by double digits.
Double digits. Wow. Okay. It's funny when you talk about super teams, and I'm not calling Kansas City a super team, but they're hovering around the dynasty term right now if they can get another one or two over the next couple of years. But in terms of those dynasty teams, the super teams in the NBA, the NFL, the NBA, I've never liked them. And you're probably like, where the hell is he going with this? In the NBA, I've never liked them. LeBron's teams, did not root for them in Miami. Couldn't stand the Warriors with Durant. But they just played the villain role really well for a lot of the fan base, and I latched on to whoever was going against them. In the NFL, those roles have been Tom Brady, and now the Chiefs are kind of taking on that role with 6 straight AFC championships. It's funny though, Ziggy, because I've always viewed the Tom Brady Patriots and now the Mahomes Chiefs, they're like heroes to me because the Vikings are consistently bullied by these other NFC teams. We have our moments, but then in the big moment, it always seems to come crashing down on us in some horrible, horrific, terrible, disheartening, soul-crushing fashion.
We'll get into that this offseason.
Yeah, we'll get into that plenty. We'll have some therapy sessions. But the Chiefs are now the team to me that can take care of the teams that that beat up on the Vikings, as Brady used to do to the NFC teams in Super Bowls. So it's pretty funny, but I'm in some weird way actually pulling for the Chiefs just because they seem to get the job done against the teams that I can't stand. Were they seriously, Tom Brady? I'm not a Patriot fan. I'm not a Brady fan, but I would always wind up rooting for them in the playoffs because they'd find themselves in the Super Bowl against some team that I'm like, yeah, I can't stand those guys. And since we can't take care of business ourselves, you can do it for us. So I'm sort of in a weird way actually pulling for the Chiefs in this game just because I'm used to rooting for them against the teams that I don't like.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking like last year, I couldn't stand the Eagles. Super happy to have the Chiefs beat them. Could not have stood another Eagles Super Bowl trophy.
Whatever,
but that's just another jaded Vikings.
No, look, I'm here to see Lamar Jackson finally get the respect he deserves. That's what I'm here for.
All right, let's talk about some of these coaches here. After 9 seasons and now a national championship, Jim Harbaugh coming back to the NFL Wednesday night. He finally agrees to terms with the Chargers. He's going to be coaching Justin Herbert and those guys. And I know there was some debate about maybe he'd look somewhere else. The Falcons were another team in interest for him.
This just felt inevitable, didn't it?
This did. I looked around the other coaching options. You had Bryce Young in Carolina. You had Sam Howell, Jaden Daniels, or Drake May in Washington. The situation in Atlanta is sort of up in the air. Geno Smith with the Seahawks. Justin Herbert makes the Chargers by far the greatest draw for any coaching candidate. This was really always the spot that Jim Harbaugh was going to end up in. Herbert, he's put up fantastic numbers his whole career. But you look at his record, he's only 30-32 as a starter. Justin Herbert actually has a losing record. And a lot of that is because his teams just found ways to lose. That became the culture in Los Angeles. So it's never good when you
that's been the culture. As long as it's been the culture for the Vikings.
Well, think about it. It's never a good sign when you have other teams saying, oh, that loss was Charger-esque, or we chargered that game. It's like teams talking about the Vikings, blowing missing a kick or something, or the Falcons blowing a big lead. Like, it's never good when your team becomes a catchphrase for losing a football game, and that's what the Chargers became. Now, look, I know Harbaugh. We talked off air at Michigan. It took him a while to win. So when I said that Harbaugh's just a winner, you said pump the brakes a little bit. But here listen to these numbers from San Francisco, Ziggy, when he took over. Steve Mariucci was gone after the 2002 season. After that, the 49ers. Now, this is like most of our prime childhood watching days for football. 7-9, 2-14, 4-12, 7-9, 5-11, 7-9, 8-8, 6-10. The 49ers sucked when I was a kid. I can never relate to the people who talked about the heyday 49ers because they were just god awful. Jim comes over, 2011, 3 straight AFC Championship games, a Super Bowl appearance, 13 wins, 11 wins, 12 wins right off the bat. Alex Smith goes from a 57.1 career completion percentage with 51 touchdowns and 53 interceptions to a 64.3% completion percentage, 30 touchdowns, 10 interceptions in 2 seasons. Look what he did with Kaepernick. I think this is a great hire for the Chargers. Resets the culture. Herbert gets a coach who's done great things with quarterbacks in the past. And you finally get someone to excite fans. You get fans. The Chargers, how often do we talk about their stadium being overrun? And maybe, might still next year, but you're going to finally get some energy in the building. I love the hire. I know you were a little hesitant. Are you on board with this?
It's always difficult to know how a head coaching hire is going to turn out. There's a lot of information we don't have access to, but this is a hire that makes sense for a lot of reasons. The fact is Harbaugh, as you say, he's one of those guys who it seems like he can just go in and build a culture. And we've seen it time and time again at both the pro and college level, right? He built a culture at Stanford that lasted for a long time. He built a culture of the 49ers that carried not without some bumps, but relatively seamlessly into what they have today. And he's built a culture at Michigan that now has a national championship when it looked like he was going to be kicked out. Instead, he's leaving with a parade. So for a Chargers team, as you say, that needs a lot of change in that direction, I think it's good. I'm not expecting immediate results. I think next year is going to be a tough year for the Chargers. A lot of it is moving off of bad decisions that have been made in the past with the roster, with how things have been handled. Though apparently consistently surrounding a roster of terrible talent around Justin Herbert gets you the GM job of the Raiders, Tom Telesco. But so even though I'm not expecting immediate results, this is something that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to be watching carefully what coordinators Harbaugh brings in. He's not one of those scheme guys, right? Those are the kinds of guys I usually prefer to be hired. But if he can bring someone in, it's just as well. I don't know. I think there's a lot to look forward to and a lot to be optimistic about. So the Chargers fans should be happy.
Like, to you, does this scream slam dunk hire, or because that's how most people are going to interpret it? Are you a little cautious about it?
You always have to be cautious about head coaching hires, right? Like, you can go back and look historically. People just have no idea who's going to hit and who isn't. Who would have thought Dan Campbell was going to hit, right? But if it were me in charge of the Chargers, I would have rather brought in somebody who we know gives a huge scheme edge, someone like Ben Johnson, who's done an incredible job building an offense in Detroit. But again, if Harbaugh sold you on his vision, he's got the coordinators. I mean, who else were you going to get? You could get Bill Belichick, but who knows how that would go? Dan Quinn. Like the options, Harbaugh is one of the better options if he sold you on the vision he's looking for. So I think it makes sense as a hiring. The Chargers, as we said, were clearly the best fit.
Yeah, I think this is a nice one too because it is a fan engagement one, and it's also this isn't just a hire to say let's get everyone excited. Jim Harbaugh knows what he's doing. He's someone that is going to come in and should get the ball rolling in the right direction. Another really great part about this Charger job, just for this year, but they're picking 5th in the draft as well. You're talking about Herbert and the top 5 pick right off the bat. It's a really nice situation for any coach, especially a coach like Harbaugh, to walk into, where he's going to have a lot of say in the future of this team, and you have a lot of valuable assets moving forward there. I think it's a bright future for the Chargers. I said they probably rank in my teams with the top 10 brightest futures at this point in time, and you need someone like Jim Harbaugh to go against the other coaches. I know you're joking, said there's only one good coach there. But you got Sean Payton, you got Andy Reid, you got, Antonio Pierce isn't quite on that level. Jim Harbaugh,
he looked good at least.
Their coaching. Yeah. Oh, he looked really good. But Jim Harbaugh elevates that coaching. Where I don't want to just say Brandon Staley. Definitely, he struggled a lot. Some guys just aren't meant to be head coaches. We said that before we started the show. Like Staley did well with the Rams. He just struggled in LA, and it was time to move on. Harbaugh is a welcome sight, I'm sure, for Charger fans. Let's talk Joe Barry, the Packers defensive coordinator, who has been there for 3 seasons. And the Packers have struggled on defense for a while. They're 27th in DVOA this past year, 25th the year before. Throughout this season, there have been some really tumultuous times towards the end of the year when things were really rising to a boiling point. You saw Bryce Young have a career day. Baker Mayfield lit up the Packer defense. Tommy DeVito, who struggled, mightily in the games after, had his best game as a starting quarterback in the NFL. It felt like it was just, it felt like it could end at that point. And then the Packer defense sort of turns it around a bit. Weeks 15 through 18, they were 4th in rushing yards allowed per game allowed at 84.3 after being 31st with 141.8. And week 17 and 18 allowed the fewest points and yards per game in the National Football League. Granted, against Nick Mullins and the Vikings and Justin Fields and the Bears, but improvement. They went in, played okay against Dallas, good early on, started to sort of show those signs in the second half of the defense they really were most of this year. But this was something, we don't want to celebrate. Everyone you're going to hear is going to say this. We don't want to celebrate a coach being fired at all, especially not us Vikings fans who enjoyed the Packer collapses over the past couple of years on defense. But this was the right decision. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and there's a reason why the Packers are sort of clearing house. They have encouraged many other defensive coaches to find new jobs. And they also fired their strength and conditioning coach. So Packers fans who were angry about all the soft tissue injuries this year should feel optimistic things will get better there. I mean, look, Joe Barry could put together some good stretches. In the playoffs, I think he was a better game planner than people gave him credit for. But at defensive coordinator, you want somebody who is consistently giving you schematic edges, right? Someone who doesn't just have a game plan for a couple games a year, but consistently is able to outcoach the opposing offensive coordinator or opposing head coach. And Joe Barry just couldn't do that. He was running a scheme that didn't fit the Packers' strengths super well and couldn't adapt. And then even when things went pretty well, it always felt like they were just one play away from collapse. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of exciting candidates this year, especially as defensive coordinators have struggled to get head coaching jobs. This has opened the opportunity for you to hire some really great minds in the NFL as defensive coordinators. So I think it makes sense to just mix it up and try someone new because you have so much talent on that defense. The results have to be better.
Yeah, the defense is loaded with first round picks there. And when you talk about all these candidates that there are, it's an enticing job in Green Bay. There was a chance that this was not a position people would covet. Just a couple months ago when they were 2-5, you're talking about a team where you're not even sure if Matt LaFleur could be around. They go on this run, and now for any defensive coach, you're looking at a team loaded with the first round picks, as we said, and on the offensive side of the ball, they're going to put up points. So all of a sudden, this turns into a position where maybe you can be contending for a Super Bowl right away if you make an impact. If you, as the defensive coordinator, can come in and have an impact similar to that of Brian Flores. Think about the Vikings just last year. That defense was horrendous a year ago. I mean, one of the worst defenses I've ever seen. And Brian Flores came in, and while they had their ups and downs, they were way better. I mean, we're talking, there was a stretch where the Vikings had one of the better defenses in the league for a few weeks. If you can get that sort of impact, now you're talking about a Super Bowl caliber team, which, assuming Jordan Love and the offense continue to progress, which a lot of people unfortunately expect them to. So let's talk about a couple of the candidates here. I asked you this before we started, and I'm just going to ask you the same question. Let's just say you're making the decision for the Packers, and I tell you, you can have any of the candidates you want. Like realistic, let's be realistic. Bill Belichick is not going to come in as a defensive coordinator. Who are you going to pick to be the defensive coordinator of the 2024 Green Bay Packers?
Of all the candidates who are available, I think there's a slam dunk hire. I'm not sure if the Packers will be able to get him, but there's a decent shot. Is Giro Evero out of Carolina. Things have it's been a clown fiesta in Carolina. There's a new head coach coming in who is probably going to want their own defensive coordinator. But we're talking about a guy who transformed the defense in Denver. I mean, you saw how bad they looked when he left. And despite all of the Panthers' offensive struggles this year, the defense was actually pretty good. Yeah. He runs a similar system. He runs that like Fangio 2 high shell type system, so players won't have to learn something entirely new. But he's had much better results with it in the past than Joe Barry. So I think if you're able to get absolutely anyone who's available, that's the slam dunk choice, and that's probably the name that's going to be number one on the Packers list.
You know, he actually was the defensive quality control coach in Green Bay in 2016. So there are some ties formerly to the Packers. It's funny, you talk about him, possibly having to stick around with whatever head coach comes into Carolina. He could be that head coach. He's interviewing there. He's interviewing with the Falcons and the Seahawks. Giro Evero is someone very highly respected around the NFL. I can see him becoming a head coach and not being an option for Green Bay. So he feels like someone that, to me, I think he fits really well. I don't expect him to be available. A lot of Packer fans are going to talk about this guy, Wink Martindale, who left the Giants with not really great. Not when I say left the Giants, I mean it was not a good breakup between the two of them. He was sort of thrown out of there. But you look at what he's done in New York. I know this year was a little rocky, but great turnaround immediately last season. And the Ravens, his units were first in yards and second in points in 2018, fourth in yards and third in points in 2019, and seventh in yards and second in points in 2020, before falling to 25th in yards and 19th in points in 2021 when he left. This is someone who's been around the league a lot, works very well with linebackers, where the Packers are loaded with people. I think this is a guy who can come in and make a big difference right off the bat, and should certainly be in that top tier of contenders for the job.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question, right? You talk about the Giants. I get that he didn't have the best year necessarily, but he left mostly because he was sick of working with them. The Giants tied Baltimore with the most forced turnovers in football this year. And let me tell you, the Giants defense did not have the same talent as Baltimore. There's no Kyle Hamilton in New Jersey. But Wink Martindale was
there was no Kyle Hamilton when he was there.
No, what I mean is what I mean is he tied with Baltimore this year for most forced turnovers. Oh, sorry. And he didn't have the same talent that Baltimore did this year.
My bad. Yeah.
Yeah. In 2018 and 2021, there was no Kyle Hamilton, but they also produced results. The thing I like about Wink Martindale is he's been in the NFL for a really long time, and he nevertheless consistently produces edges with schematics. He's one of the most creative defensive coordinators we've seen in the past 20 or 30 years in the NFL. Every year he comes out with new blitz packages that confuse the opposing quarterbacks, right? He is constantly generating pressure. Occasionally that leads to big plays. That's true, but more often than not, it doesn't. And he's able to compensate for it with typically decent run defense and a whole bunch of forced turnovers. So if you're talking about a guy who's able, with basically any group of players, to come in and immediately generate an impact, he's your guy.
Yeah, and the Packers struggled to generate turnovers this year. They only had 18. That's 23rd in the NFL. The pass rush struggled a lot this year, even though they came on at the end. In many ways, as dangerous as it could be to have an aggressive coach, because, you do allow some bigger plays, it's fun when you have someone who's just throwing blitzes and you're intercepting the ball. At times that wins you games. When it can cost you, sometimes it's refreshing to see that after having a more of a laid back defense that gets picked apart. Trust me, I'm telling you from this past Vikings year. Yes, I will be just a little bit quicker on these candidates here. But Mike Zimmer is someone who I know a lot of Packers fans have mentioned. They know him well. He was with the Vikings for so long. We know him well. Zimmer, look, he's one of the best coaches, head coaches the Vikings have ever had, even though there was turmoil there at times. Mike Zimmer's going to come in. He doesn't take shit from anybody. like Mike Zimmer will come in and there will be an edge to that Packer defense. I don't know how well him and LaFleur get along. He's also getting older, but he said in an interview recently, I love to teach, love to coach. He's been studying apparently. I think Mike Zimmer is someone who could come in and it would go one of two ways. It would either be beautiful in Green Bay, and we're talking about a defense where you have people, he's known for the double A gap blitzes. You'd have people disguising, go get him a safety to work with like Harrison Smith, which way easier said than done. But Mike Zimmer could have fun with this Packer defense. On the other hand, can't you imagine a scenario where Mike Zimmer comes in and he's grouchy, doesn't get along with people, and next thing you know, it's blowing up and he's gone mid-season?
Yeah, I worry a lot about the Zimmer talk because, Paul, you remember watching the Vikings defense. It was very, very good for most of his tenure, but towards the end, he was starting to get old, right? And I get that he had a whole lot of other responsibilities going on that weren't going super well, but he spent almost all his time with the defense, and the defense stopped being good. I worry that he's lost some of that edge he's had when he was younger. Unlike a guy like Wink Martindale, who's also pretty old and been around for the long time, but has consistently produced results even this year. So if I'm looking for somebody has been out of football for a while, Leslie Frazier, I think, is a more exciting candidate there. People forget how good Leslie Frazier's defenses were of the Bills, Paul. People forget.
I know. So maybe Leslie Frazier seems like one of the nicest guys in the world, by the way. When you listen to him talk, I have nothing against Leslie Frazier. I just remember, I can't get out of my head those Vikings teams, which we weren't very talented, to be fair to Leslie. And I know he had success with Buffalo. He did wind up he didn't get fired, but they didn't bring him back at the end of his time there.
Well, after if there's the thing he will be remembered for the rest of his career is 13 seconds.
That's it's tough. It's tough when you have the 13-second game, because if they win that, they very well might win the Super Bowl that year, which, it's just an unfortunate end for him. That's not the direction I would go. Let's bring up just two more guys here, then we'll move on. A lot of people are mentioning Jim Leonard, the former Wisconsin defensive coordinator, interim head coach there for a very short tenure. He's the senior football analyst at Illinois right now. Someone that the Packers actually offered the job to when LaFleur was looking for a replacement for Mike Pettin. And he said no. Then they were between Evero and Joe Barry. They wound up going with Joe Barry. Looks like the wrong decision now in hindsight. But Jim Leonard's someone people are going to be paying attention to. Another really aggressive style defensive coordinator where a lot of man-to-man. He's going to be sending people. You're going to have big plays against you. You're also going to force a lot of big plays. I'm not sure, given where this team is right now, I'd want to go in that direction. A lot of Packer fans are probably going to love him, being a Wisconsin guy, but that it feels like more of a gamble than some of these other candidates.
He has no coaching experience in the NFL, which means it's very difficult to know exactly how it's going to turn out. I will say this, here's the thing about the Packers defense that seemed true is particularly Jair Alexander had a pretty hard time, obviously, connecting with the coaches. Jim Leonard is a guy who, by all accounts, when he comes in, everyone loves him. So if you're looking for a guy to sort of establish a culture where people are excited to come into work, they're ready to work hard, they're ready to play their best, he could be a good choice. And again, because he's never coached in the NFL, you don't know what you're going to get, good or bad. So there's definitely a possibility there. Again, there's a reason they offered him the job in the first place, right? Again, I just think on the current market with the current defensive coordinators, there are guys who have proven themselves a little bit more. Those will be more ideal candidates, in my opinion.
I agree. Look, he could be a slam dunk, but I agree. And the last guy, because I know this isn't a Packer defensive coordinator show, but Al Harris, the defensive backs coach for the Cowboys, obviously all you Packers fans know him from the times he used to torture the Vikings. He's one of the first guys I remember watching is Al Harris, and that long hair, just an iconic Packer player in my memory. Someone I actually always kind of liked along the Packers teams with so many guys I didn't enjoy watching. But Al Harris, like look at Trayvon Diggs, look at Deron Bland. He's turning these guys into playmakers, doing a good job with that Dallas secondary. He could be really valuable in Green Bay with Jair, Stokes. He's a couple other young corners there. But again, another guy, never a defensive coordinator. Feels like it might be a little early there, but someone the fan base loves and would get behind.
Yeah, it feels to me like he was just playing in the NFL. He's actually been coaching for over a decade. And let's not forget when he played, he has a huge diverse background in the NFL, right? He played for Jim Johnson. He played for Steve Spagnuolo. Like he's played with a lot of these great defensive coordinators and hopefully internalized some of those lessons. Oh, sure. If you're looking for a guy who's on the up and up, right, and who knows Green Bay, who's beloved by the fans, hire who will at least be a hit with the fans. If nothing else, he's a good choice. I'd be really excited to see what he could do. Again,
it would be exciting for the.
You just worry when what you're asking for after what we've seen from Jordan Love in the offense. You don't need the defense to carry you in games. You just need them to be functional. There's a lot of risk there.
But man, that would be fun. I would love to see what Al Harris could do with that Packer defense, and the fan base would be thrilled. So let us know in the comment section, Packer fans, which doesn't necessarily have to be one of the guys we mentioned. If there's someone else you like, let us know.
How about Brandon Staley? Brandon Staley.
There are a lot of great candidates out there this season. Last guy we're going to talk about briefly here is Bill Belichick. He's only interviewed with Atlanta. Started off, rumors flying. People are saying, oh, wow, Bill's going to go and join that loaded offense, go get his quarterback potentially, and we'll see what happens. That seems to have died down. 2 very quick interviews within a week. Now it's apparently has lost some steam. There are rumors that the control of the team is a potential issue. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes? And the Falcons, they've interviewed Mike Vrabel, a bunch of other guys. They have a huge list of people they're supposed to interview. We'll see what Arthur winds up doing in that situation. But when you talk about Belichick, again, similar to Harbaugh, the places that you can go, I can't see him going to Carolina. I can't. He's not going to go to Seattle probably. That leaves the Commanders and the Falcons. So it's got to be one of those two, right? And between the two of them, in Washington, you can get more control over that team, but you're going to have to draft a Drake May or a Jaden Daniels and then build from there. I think the ideal situation for him, and maybe Atlanta's moved on, but if you go to Atlanta, that team has a lot of talent there. And we've heard rumors about Kirk Cousins potentially going over with them. All of a sudden now you're talking about a team that, in my opinion, would definitely be the best one in the NFC South heading into next year, or at least the front runner. And arguably, could make some noise in the NFC playoffs if Kirk is able to recover, which I think he will from that Achilles injury. If you were the Falcons, is that what you would try and do?
I don't think so. Look, I'm excited about Bill Belichick, the coach, but there's only one explanation I can come up with for why he's not getting interviews, right? It's not as though, every owner in the NFL has watched Bill Belichick dominate in the league and probably dominate their team while they're at it. So they know that they are getting a great coach. And even though the past couple of years in New England weren't great, you were still seeing generally a well-coached, effective team that just couldn't figure out the offense. The only explanation I can give is that Belichick wants personnel control. And if I'm the Falcons, I'm a Falcons fan. Here's what I'm sitting back and saying. Terry Fontenot had his best season as an offseason as a GM, right? This team is surrounded with a lot of talent. Yeah, maybe we made a mistake at quarterback, but he's relying on Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith couldn't get it done. It happens. Our defense is vastly improved. We've got so many exciting players on offense. Are we ready to basically give up our GM so Belichick can come in and do what he's done in New England the past few years? Bring in guys that he's excited about, but that often don't pan out. It's not like there aren't other legendary coaches on the market. You know who doesn't want GM control that's available? Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll's not as good as Belichick, but he's pretty dang good. So if Belichick, as I think he does, really wants big personnel control, he wants to be number one, he wants everything done his way. It's tough for me to give that up for a guy who, just on the basis of his age, isn't going to be around long term.
Yeah, I think Vrabel actually could be a nice fit there.
Yeah, don't pick Vrabel. Take a good coach instead.
I know you don't like Vrabel. Yeah, Ben Johnson would be fun with that offense, wouldn't he?
Yeah, get a Ben Johnson back. I mean, there's a lot you can do, right? Again, I think Belichick is a great coach and organization. Be happy to have him. You just have to worry about giving up too much power for a 72-year-old. He's 71 or 72. He's old. Matter. He's over 70, and he's only going to be around for a few years, even if he's a huge hit.
Do you like Kirk going to Atlanta? I know this isn't on the coaching subject.
I mean, if you get Belichick and you get Kirk and you get a good offensive coordinator, if Kirk goes to Atlanta, you can finally unlock all those weapons. You don't have to be as good as the 2023 Vikings offense, which was one of the best offenses in the NFL, and it is a tragedy of global proportions that we didn't get to see that for the whole season. But you don't have to be that good in order to be competitive as this Falcons team, right? Your division sucks, right? The Saints are going to be even worse next year. The Panthers aren't going to have it together. The Buccaneers are facing a tough offseason. Like, the division is yours for the taking. You bring in a great quarterback with all those weapons and an ascending defense, you're making the playoffs. Heck, you could be the 2 seed or the 1 seed. You're chilling.
Look, I know it might not be the hire that's necessarily right for the long-term future. Belichick and Kirk Cousins coming in, I would be so jacked up if I were a Falcons fan. And look, maybe that's why I'm not sitting back, making those decisions, is because at the end of the day, I am just a fan. But man, Belichick, Kirk, that offense,
it'd be so much
defense.
Fun.
Holy crap. We're talking about a team now that could seriously contend in an NFC where how many teams really are there that you're afraid of next year if you're the Falcons in that situation? San Francisco, probably, maybe. I don't know anyone else. That would be, wow, that would be fun. I love that Kirk is finally getting some respect after years and years. A little bit like, did you say it was sort of like Matthew Stafford to you?
It feels a lot like Matthew Stafford, that he's always been very good, but because the postseason results haven't been there, he's not getting enough respect.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure that this would be the situation, where you walk in and it's, you don't have Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald. I think that was a loaded Rams roster that was seriously just the quarterback away. But man, this Falcons team could control a weak division with Kirk Cousins. Even if you get Kirk and not necessarily Belichick, I think that's a great quarterback for them to go after. Draft someone else. That guy would be awesome. Kirk Cousins is awesome quarterback.
I think you can tell that this is a tough offseason for the Falcons because they've already interviewed 14 head coaching candidates. There are so many directions this team could go, from Kirk Cousins and trying to get a Super Bowl of Belichick, to hiring like Steve Wilkes, trying to get a culture, to hiring Ben Johnson, drafting a quarterback, trying to build.
It's crazy. It's insane to think, and still more interviews coming where this team, you have no idea the direction, and the decision is so important for the next 2-3 years of this team at least. Let's end very quickly here. Just a couple. We asked for some mailbag questions. We'll do this pretty quickly here. I like this one. Someone asked, would you rather have Jordan Love be a Hall of Fame quarterback or the Vikings never have a Hall of Fame quarterback again? This is easy. You guys can have
they already have their Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yeah, we've been dealing with this for 30 years. I am not sacrificing the future of Hall of Fame quarterbacks in Minnesota just to avoid another 10 years of Jordan Love misery. So let him be great. We've worked around it before. We've blown in other ways. Like we'll have him join us.
Hold on, I do have to ask, if Hall of Fame quarterback means like Brett Favre at the end of his career, then I could maybe take it. But if you're talking like we draft a quarterback, that quarterback is great, you got to take that.
Yeah, we need we need that option. Let's see, what else do we have here? Merle asking. I'm sorry that I don't have the names of who asked the questions. All of a sudden,
Somehow,
it deleted.
I don't know what happened there,
Yeah, deleted all the. So we're just going off the ones that we remember looking at or throwing into the chat briefly. But Merle asked, "How did you guys become fans of your teams?" Between me, Zach, Jack, and Ziggy. Personally, for myself, my dad just grew up a Vikings fan. Lived in New Jersey. Really liked the Purple People Eaters. Liked the color purple. Didn't want to root for the same team as all of his friends for Giants, Jets, Raiders were in there. So the Vikings were really good. He hopped on that bandwagon, and year after year of misery, finally, built some tough skin around him, made them root for him even more until it became an unfortunate curse on the family.
For me, it was the effect of a long lobbying effort, actually, by you, Paul.
No, thank you.
You spent so much time trying to convince me to become a Vikings fan. And one day, I was at a lunch with a philosophy professor that I know, talking about one of my papers. And he asked me, he knew I care about football, and he asked me what team I was a fan of. And at that time, I'd been watching a lot of Rams, and I was about to say the Rams. But I realized deep in my heart, the kind of fan I am, I'm not a Rams fan. I'm not here for like the glitzy, the gold, the shiny new Les Snead big trade. I'm here for misery. And there is no team that offers misery like the Minnesota Vikings. So, Paul, you convinced me to go in on this, and I'm enjoying it.
And the Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes that day. It's a horrible decision. Like you walked away right before the Super Bowl for the Rams, but we're glad to have you on board.
I'm feeling good.
We're glad to have you on board, and the day will come. Our moment will come. A couple more here. Would you guys ever do ayahuasca with Aaron Rodgers?
No.
It says, would you also ever just try it on your own? Probably not. I probably wouldn't try it on my own. Look, if Aaron Rodgers came and offered some, probably not. But yeah, I could be talked into it. With Aaron Rodgers, that could be a wild ride.
No, the risk of having a psychotic episode on ayahuasca is way too high. I'm not here to literally lose my mind.
I'd have to look into the side effects more, but I tentatively say yes. It's kind of who knows. And then there was one more here. What was this, Ziggy? What was the Italy one?
No, there were 2 more. One was, we got to answer this. Favorite long snapper.
Oh,
I've got an easy answer here, but
I'd say DePaul, the Vikings' current long snapper, best in the league.
See, for me, it was I was a Rams fan back then. Jake McCade. He was part of the Rams Trinity. Greg Zuerlein, Jake McCade, Johnny Hecker. That was so much fun to watch with Bones Fassel coordinating them. Best defensive unit or special teams unit in NFL history, really.
Yeah, I remember you talking about those guys. Like, I don't know who the Rams long snapper is, Ziggy. I don't really know many long snappers. I do just know it's become sort of an inside joke with some of my friends that Andrew DePaul, the Vikings long snapper, it will be like, we have nothing, but we do have an all-pro long snapper. We do have the Pro Bowl long snapper. So I know his family owns a bagel shop in Minnesota. Go check out their bagel shop.
And then the final question that you said, Paul, should Italy remain a unified country, or should it split into many different regional states?
I will go out on a limb and say they should remain a unified country.
Do you want an actual answer to this?
I would love to hear your actual answer.
So here's something that I've actually been monitoring: is there is a significant rise of fascist ideology in Italy. So here's something that seems true, right? Says like the Giorgia Meloni stuff, like fascism's kind of bad. So we should think what minimizes the risk of fascism while still preserving the important cultural identities of a region. And I think the best answer to that, you go on a region by region basis, but as any Italian will tell you, many of these regions have deep cultural histories, right? I mean, you look at somewhere like Sicily. There's a deep cultural heritage there. They functioned well as an independent city-state for a long time. Now, if assuming they agree, of course, but as long as the regions are willing to, and they're willing to take the hits to international trade, defense, that sort of thing. Though if the European Union and NATO, I think you don't have to worry about this nearly as much. I think it makes a lot of sense to hold referendums and consider splitting up Italy. Of course, like there's a wide variety of social and political factors you have to consider, but considering the deep regional history and the dangers of fascism, I think this can make a lot of sense.
I can't remember. I can't remember who submitted the question, but that has to be above and beyond whatever you expect.
It's stupid. No one asked me about 17th century theories of gravity, the stuff I actually know a lot about. So this is sort of my best guess. But if you got any philosophy questions,
oh boy. God, yeah. Throw some philosophy. If anyone wants, throw some philosophy questions in there, and we will have a field day. That could be an entire episode by the time we're done recording. But Ziggy is crazy good at philosophy. I mean, he's a teacher. So there you go. There are 5 quick mailbag questions. We appreciate everyone who's stuck around. This turned into a long recording between just the two of us here. But fun times. What the hell is the saying? What am I trying to think of? Good times go by fast. What am I thinking of?
Time flies when you're having fun.
Time flies when you're having fun. Oh my God. It's been a long day. It's been a long day, long recording. We'll be back, though, with the reactions to the NFC Championship games. Hopefully all the guys are feeling better by then. We appreciate everyone who's been listening, subscribing, engaging, and we'll have a lot more content coming soon. See ya.
I'll say this. If you watched all the way to the end, you can hear me say this. Go, Pat, go. No one's going to make it this far, so I don't have to worry about this getting out. So don't tell anyone in the comments that I said this, but you'll know. You'll know that I just said that on air.